In this video, we'll go over some of the best generic normal summons that you can gain advantage from that are for monsters that are not entirely dependent on an archetype in order to gain advantage, and can be kind of splashed into various decks. And at number 10, we have kind of a legacy spot here with Breaker the Magical Warrior. This is a level 4 warrior type monster with 1600 attack that has an effect where, when this card is normal summoned, you can place one spell counter on it. And while it has a spell counter, it gains 300 attack, and also, you can remove one spell counter from this card in order to destroy one spell or trap card on the field. So on summon, this card can basically destroy one spell or trap card, which is a net +1 in card advantage. Or if you don't want to destroy a spell or trap card, you have a 1900 attack beat stick on the field, which was definitely competitively viable when Breaker the Magical Warrior came out in 2003. Where beat sticks were still kind of playable at the time, and since the card could choose to be a competitive beat stick or a spell and trap card removal, it was an absolute beast of a staple card that was played in pretty much every deck. The card was so good in fact that it was even banned for a while, and was on and off the limited list for the longest time, where it's still limited in the GOAT format, one of the most popular side formats of Yu-Gi-Oh, which uses an old card set. Compared to other cards at the time, Breaker was kind of overpowered, as most cards were like Zombra the Dark, where they had high attack but a whole bunch of restrictions attached to them, whereas Breaker the Magical Warrior had high attack with a very beneficial effect attached to it instead. In fact, we still don't really have cards that are generic that can match its power, as most cards which can destroy a spell or trap card on a normal summon either have much lower attack, or are attached to various archetype specific cards that can't use their effects very easily outside of their archetypes, like Spiral Super Agents or Traptrix Marmelia. Although the card definitely doesn't see competitive play nowadays, as only being able to destroy a spell or trap card for using your whole normal summon is definitely not worth playing the card when you could use one of the higher options on this list instead. And at number 9, we have Ipiria. This is a level 2 reptile type monster with only 500 attack that has the effect where, on summon, you get to draw one card. The effect does have a hard once per turn on it, but is one of the best effects you can have on summon. The ability to unconditionally draw a card on summon is a straight +1 in card advantage, and it was usually tied to all kinds of restrictions when it was performed with cards prior to Ipiria being added to the game. There is a level 7 monster in the game called Flame Ogre, which has a restriction where it can't be special summoned, and when it's normal summoned, you only get to draw one card. And the card saw heavy competitive play in Yu-Gi-Oh! Duel Links, where there was a skill in the game that allowed you to normal summon this card by just paying a whole bunch of life points, because the ability to unconditionally draw a card on summon is just really good. There's also cards like Witch of the Black Rose that has an effect to draw one card on its summon, but only under the conditions that you control no other cards, and the card that you draw has to be a monster. Otherwise, it's sent to the graveyard and the card destroys itself afterwards. And there's also 2 level 4 monsters that can draw a card on their summon, but Sacred Crane only draws a card if it's special summoned, not normal summoned, and Molten Zombie only draws a card if it was special summoned from the graveyard specifically. So as you can see, all of these generic card draws have a whole bunch of restrictions attached to them. So the fact that Ipiria allows you to just unconditionally draw a card on its normal or special summon is definitely a great generic normal summon, if all you want is just one card draw and to have a monster on the field that you can use for link plays. However, the effect is a hard once per turn, so you can't abuse the effect by bringing it out multiple times in a turn, and they gave it very low stats so it can't contest the board very well. So technically an excellent generic normal summon effect, it technically saw competitive play, but it's just not as powerful as some of the higher options on this list, which can use their normal summons to better effect. And at number 8, we have Fairy Tale Rochka. This is a level 4 monster with 1850 attack, which has the effect where, on its normal summon, you can make your opponent gain 500 life points, then your opponent looks at the top 3 cards of your deck and chooses one of them to add to your hand. So basically, it draws a card on its summon. It's just your opponent picks one of the 3 cards to add to your hand, and it has a much bigger body on the board than Ipiria. So, it's a slightly better version of that card, for its normal summon anyway. Ipiria still also draws a card on its special summon as well, whereas Fairy Tale Rochka does not. But for basically being a bigger version of Ipiria, and giving you that ever so important +1 of a card, it gets a slightly higher spot on this list than the level 2 reptile. And at number 7, we have Mathematician. This is a level 3 monster which has the effect where on its normal summon you can send any level 4 or lower monster from your deck to the graveyard. Also, if this card is destroyed by battle, you get to draw one card. Now, the ability to send any low-level monster from your deck to the graveyard is really good in all kinds of separate combo decks, and also just as a generic way to send a card to the graveyard to get another card on the field. For example, if you use this in order to send Perform H Trick Clown to the graveyard, it can then special summon itself immediately from the graveyard with its effect. You can also just send Perform H Damage Juggler to the graveyard, use its effect in the graveyard to search out Perform H Hat Tricker, and then special summon that card from your hand. It could also be used to send Zephyros to the graveyard to special summon. You could send Plague Spreader Zombie to get a tuner on the field, Sinister Serpent to get an extra card in your hand on your next turn, and a whole bunch of other more specific combo pieces. The ability to send a specific card from your deck to the graveyard is really good. That's why Foolish Burial is still limited to 1 copy. And Mathematician just allows you to send pretty much whatever you want of the lower levels. The card would probably be broken if it allowed you to send any level of monster from your deck to the graveyard. But even with its restriction, it's still swimming in a whole bunch of viable targets. There's also Armageddon Knight, which sends any dark monster from your deck to the graveyard on its summon, and is, funnily enough, more useful because there's just better dark targets to send to the graveyard than there are level 4 or lower targets. And also, Armageddon Knight can activate its effect on its special summon in addition to its normal summon. And at number 6, we have Neo Space Connector. This is a level 4 monster which has the effect where, on its normal summon, you can special summon a Neo-Spacian monster from your hand or deck in defense position, or the level 7 vanilla monster Elemental Hero Neos. It also has an additional effect where it can tribute itself in order to special summon one of these cards from the graveyard, but really, the best way to use this card is to bring out Neo-Spacian Aqua Dolphin in order to get rid of one of your opponent's hand traps out of their hand. You see, Neo Space Connector is part of an archetype technically, and its normal summon isn't really generic where you have to play a Neo-Spacian monster in your deck as well. But Neo Space Connector was used to very heavy competitive success as a generic engine, and not actually part of its archetype at all. And that's because Neo Space Connector and the main card it brings out are both warrior type monsters, which means you can search out the main combo piece with the reinforcement to the army, and you can use both of the bodies in the field in order to go into Isolde 2 Tales of Noble Knights, which allows you to go +2 in card advantage with its 2 effects. And also, the fact that the best card you can bring out, Neo-Spacian Aqua Dolphin, has an effect that allows you to look at your opponent's hand in order to get rid of one of their hand traps, and play around the other ones that you see. So, Neo Space Connector is a +1 on its summon, in one of the best ways to summon a monster, i.e. from your deck. It has an excellent type to go into a really good extra deck monster, but it does require you to play a Garnet in your deck in order to accomplish this, which is why it's at a slightly lower spot than some of the other cards I'm going to talk about, which can kind of do the same thing. And at number 5, we have Deep Sea Diva. This is a level 2 tuner monster with only 200 attack, and has the effect where on its normal summon, you can special summon any level 3 or lower Sea Serpent monster from your deck. Now, an important thing to note about Deep Sea Diva is that she can bring out another copy of herself from the deck, which means if you use Deep Sea Diva, it's a +1 in card advantage by special summoning a monster from the deck, which, as we've established, is a really great effect to have on summon. It's incredibly rare for a monster to be able to generically summon a monster from the deck, so pretty much all the ones that can do that on their normal summon are going to be on this list. However, one advantage that Deep Sea Diva has over something like Neo Space Connector is that it's both a tuner and can special summon other copies of itself, which means if you do play 3 copies of Deep Sea Diva, you don't have to play any other Sea Serpent monsters if you don't want to. And since it's a tuner, a normal summon of Deep Sea Diva sets up Christian Halki Fibrax combos, which is definitely more useful in more decks than being able to set up Isolde with Neo Space Connector. And also, if you do want to play other levels of Sea Serpent monsters, you could use Deep Sea Diva in order to go into a 1-card levels 3 through 5 synchros, if that's something your deck wants to accomplish. But you don't have to, because the 1-card Christian Halki Fibrax combo, which is more than good enough as a starter card for a generic normal summon. And at number 4, we have Tour Guide from the Underworld. This is a level 3 monster that special summons any level 3 fiend monster from your hand or deck on its normal summon, but the effects of the card is negated and it cannot be used as a synchro material. Now, Tour Guide from the Underworld was one of the best normal summons in the game when it came out, but it has definitely fallen out of favor over time, because a lot of archetypes can gain more value by just using their normal summons inherent to their archetype, and don't really need to play Tour Guide from the Underworld. Tour Guide also has the neat benefit of being able to summon other copies of itself from the deck, just like Deep Sea Diva. So you don't have to play any Garnets if you don't want to. However, there are some excellent Garnets you can play, which can be summoned with Tour Guide from the Underworld to great advantage. One of them being Sangan, a level 3 monster that searches any monster with less than 1500 attack from your deck when it's sent from the field to the graveyard. So, if you use Tour Guide in order to pull Sangan from your deck, then you can use both of them to go into a Link 2 monster in order to search a hand trap with Sangan's effect, which will be live on your next turn, because Sangan also negates the effects of the card it searches out during the turn that it's searched out. And with this combo, Tour Guide basically goes +2 in card advantage, while being able to search out a hand trap of your choice. Tour Guide can also search out a tuner monster, which can turn the card into a 1-card Christian Halki Fibrax, just like Deep Sea Diva. Although, this does require you to play a level 3 Fiend tuner, which is basically going to be a Garnet because you only want to pull it from your deck with Tour Guide from the Underworld. So because Tour Guide has the option to just play copies of itself for generic Link 2 summons, play Sangan in order to search a hand trap, or play a tuner in order to be a 1-card Crystron Halqifibrax, I think it's a little bit higher than Deep Sea Diva, who doesn't really have the same amount of good targets. And at number 3, we have Phantom Sky Blaster. This is a level 4 monster which has the effect that when it's normal summoned, you can special summon any number of Sky Blaster tokens to your side of the field, up to the number of monsters that you control. These tokens are level 4 and have 500 attack and defense, so excellent targets for synchro summons and, more importantly, link plays. So, if you normal summon Phantom Sky Blaster to an empty field, you get to summon at least 1 token, which gives it kind of the same card advantage as the previous 3 spots in this list, just without having to play any other targets in your deck to bring it out, since it generates the tokens from thin air. If you simply have 1 other monster on the field before you normal summon Phantom Sky Blaster, then you get 2 tokens, which is immediately more advantage on the field in the previous 3 spots, not counting combos of cards like Sangan. If you have 2 other monsters in the field, one of them in the extra monster zone, then you get to summon 3 tokens, which is basically the most amount of card advantage you can get out of this card, because you can't really get more tokens than 3. And just having 2 other monsters on the field before this card hits the field is not that hard in a lot of decks. And just getting 1 token off the effect is also pretty decent, as you can use it for link climbing shenanigans. And simply just having 1 other monster on the field before Phantom Sky Blaster gives it the same amount of advantage as something like Blackwing Gofu the Vague Shadow, which is currently banned because of its token summoning shenanigans. Although part of the reason Blackwing Gofu the Vague Shadow is also banned is because the card itself is a tuner, which makes it a little bit more viable with Crystron Halqifibrax, which Phantom Sky Blaster lacks. So, because of how easy it is for Phantom Sky Blaster to summon tokens on its own, it's a very powerful normal summon, which is why the card is currently limited to 1 copy in the TCG. Also, fun fact, this card has a secondary effect where during your standby phase, you can inflict 300 damage to your opponent for each Sky Blaster monster you control. But your Sky Blaster monsters can't attack during the turn you activate this secondary effect, which does also lock out the card Cast Down the Sky Blaster Musketeer from attacking, since it's technically a Sky Blaster card. And at number 2, we have Predaplant Ophrys Scorpio. When this card is normal or special summoned, it allows you to send 1 monster from your hand to the graveyard in order to special summon a Predaplant monster from your deck, except another copy of itself. So, unlike the previous 4 spots, you don't actually gain card advantage from its initial summon, because you do have to discard 1 card in order to special summon 1. However, one of the cards you can summon with this is what makes this card so incredibly valuable, and that of course is Predaplant Darlingtonia Cobra, which is a level 3 monster that has the effect where, if it's special summoned by the effect of a Predaplant monster, you can add any Polymerization or Fusion spell card from your deck to your hand. So, if you add something like Instant Fusion, you can bring out one of the plethora of excellent level 5 or lower fusion monsters to both extend plays and maybe remove a monster from your opponent's side of the field with something like Thousand Eyes Restrict. You can also pull something like Super Polymerization in order to break your opponent's board, as that's a very powerful going second card. And back when Brilliant Fusion wasn't banned, it was the premier target to be searched out, because it just gave a further +2 in card advantage through board presence. So, even with only the best generic cards being either Instant Fusion or Super Polymerization, it still allows you to go +1 on summon, special summoning an even level monster from your deck, so you can go into rank 3 plays if you want for whatever reason. You have 2 dark monsters in the field with no other restrictions for link plays, and of course gives you access to pretty much every fusion spell card in the game, which combos well with a whole bunch of different types of fusion-based decks. In fact, its normal summon is so good that it's even limited in the OCG, where they have Brilliant Fusion limited to 1 copy. And at number 1, we have Aleister the Invoker, probably the best generic normal summon in the game, if not the best normal summon period. This card has the effect on summon to add itself back to your hand and special summon an Invoked Macabre from your extra deck, which is basically a +1 in total card economy, while having an excellent boss monster in the field that can negate any one of your opponent's card effects, just as long as you have a card in your hand to discard of the same type. Not too many of these cards in this list can bring out a boss monster with a negate on their normal summon, and even add themselves back to their hand to be used again on your next turn to do the same thing. Because how the effect actually works is, on its normal summon you get to add the invocation spell card from your deck to your hand. Then you can send Aleister to the graveyard with something like Artemis the Magistus Moon Maiden or Salamangreat Almirage, so that you can use invocation with one of those 2 cards in order to go into Invoked Macabre or Invoked Purgatrio. Then you use invocation from the graveyard in order to add Aleister the Invoker from your banished pile back to your hand and reset invocation back into the deck so it can be searched again. And since the engine both gets a boss monster on the field and resets itself every turn, you can just keep doing the same play every other turn with 1 card in your starting hand, just as long as you have the fusion monsters available in your extra deck. This is why Aleister the Invoker is splashed in so many different kinds of decks, because as long as you have the extra deck space to play the fusion monsters, the main deck requirement is basically just Aleister and the invocations. and anything else you want to dedicate to searching those cards out. And then once you normal summon Aleister a single time, you basically have the combo set up for the rest of the duel, as long as your opponent doesn't disrupt it in some way. So, for being able to bring out a boss monster every turn on its normal summon, and resetting its combo to be used again on your next turn in the process, you can't really beat the generic normal summon potential of Aleister the Invoker. Alright, and that's the list. Are there any other better generic normal summons that I may have missed? Or do you have ideas for future videos just like this one? If so, I'd love to see those things down in the comments.